Good evening, folks. Kent Hovind here at Dinosaur Adventureland in Lenox, Alabama. Tonight, August 23rd, 31st, is the last session of our 2025 Creation Boot Camp here at Dinosaur Adventureland. We want to raise up some soldiers to get involved in this war against the stupid evolution religion, which is destroying our kids' minds and morals. We think it's dumb and dangerous to teach the kids they believe they came from a rock, which came from a dot of nothing. And that is what evolution says. I'm looking for more debates. Donnie says he's moderated 120 of my debates. Well, Donnie and Matt are going to be on tonight. Tell us more about why evolution is stupid. If you want to help, call me, 855-BIG-DINO, extension 3. I get calls all day. Be glad to talk to you. Or come visit Dinosaur Adventureland. We've had a bunch of folks here this weekend for boot camp. It's all free. We'll feed you, house you. If you stay too long, we'll put you to work. Okay, tonight, boot camp. We're on a bunch of channels. They took us off of YouTube mostly. There's several people still posting my stuff. We're on Rumble. Let's see, Facebook. X, whatever that is, our own app, the Instagram. You can go to one of them buttons and push something. Our TikTok account's got over 72,000. So come join us. Okay, Donnie and Matt, you guys been a blessing getting the creation message out. So give me some more debates, would you please? I got 389 and I'm stuck. So leave it with you guys. Donnie, take it away. You guys tell us how evolution is stupid, will you? Go ahead.
And we will have a lot of fun doing it too, brother. And so I am going to kick us off here by screen sharing, Joseph. And I'll get the slides up here. Kent, we have to get you to debate 500, brother. Let's see here. Okay. I'm looking forward to this one. The evidence that matters most. Boot Camp 2025. Now, please raise your hand in the live studio if you believe that you are related to a banana plant. Joseph, put your hand down. Now, I'm assuming that all hands are down, possibly one or two are up. And I'm here to tell you that, yes, there are people who believe that they are related to banana plants, strawberries, and whales. And Matt and I tonight, we're here to help. And so it is a privilege to be presenting for Dr. Dino's boot camp. Kent has been a tremendous blessing over the years. I would not be where I'm at with our ministry here, Standing for Truth, if it were not for Kent and his phenomenal work defending the truth of biblical creation. And it was years and years ago when I first saw Kent demolish these evolutionary professors in these universities. And it was then that it clicked. The light bulb went off and I realized that, no, I'm not related to banana plants and walking sticks. And so we are going to cover a lot of information in this presentation. It'll be myself, Donny Budinsky, and Matt Nailor. I've been a Christian now for about 10 years. I'm married to my beautiful wife, Jessica, and I have 3 kids. And the most important thing about myself, of course, is that I am a believer in the Lord Jesus Christ. And so here we go. This scientific evidence that we will present here tonight for young earth creation might just blow your mind. I'm sorry to say, you've been lied to. The tooth fairy does not exist. There is no magical folklore figure who visits children overnight to collect lost baby teeth and leave some money under your pillow. As fun as that sounds, it's simply not true. And again, I'm sorry, you've been lied to. You are not related to banana plants and fish. Now, you can find endless content and material over at our official website, standfortruthministries.com, where you can find answers to many of the challenges presented by critics to the biblical creation worldview. We've written several books. A lot of the information that we will be presenting here today can be found in more detail in our presentations on the topic, where we take a single topic and just focus an entire hour on it. And you can find it, a lot of these pieces of evidence in our books. So this one's Special Creation, touches a lot on the scientific evidence for Adam and Eve. This one here is the Endogenous Retrovirus Handbook. And so it's been said many times, you can just Google what's the best so-called evidence for evolution. And what you'll find is endogenous retroviruses, these supposed shared viral-like sequences in the biological world. And so in this book, I dismantle very thoroughly the so-called best evidence for evolution. I ask the question, are these really the ancient vestiges or leftover remnants of past viral infections? Or are they created units of DNA function? I demonstrate that they have significant functions, and without them, we could not exist. And so asking why do we share ERV-like sequences in the biological world would be like asking why do all types of modes of transportation have engines in common? Well, if you don't have an engine in your vehicle, you're not going to get very far. And it turns out that ERVs are functional in embryological development, determining cell types. They also function in the immune system. Now, it's interesting because the best evidence or so-called evidence for common descent has been completely overturned. It's 2025, and it is a great time to be a biblical creationist. This is an excerpt from a prominent theistic evolution ministry, BioLogos. And so on their website, they have what they believe are the best reasons why we should accept the theory of evolution. And one of their pieces of evidence that they focus on here are genetic scars. The idea that we have these pseudogenes, shared genetic mistakes between chimpanzees and other forms of life. That's been completely overturned. Feel free to save this slide. These are several papers of many showing known functional roles for so-called pseudogenes. These functional DNA elements, they didn't call themselves pseudogenes. And so now we know that they are necessary to sustain healthy life processes in the cell. ERVs, as I covered briefly, numerous functions have been identified for these amazingly designed DNA units. ERVs are playing an antiviral role in the genome. They function in determining cell types. The presentation tonight is not primarily to focus on ERVs and pseudogenes, but I do have an entire presentation that you can see that just focuses on all things ERVs. Here's a couple of articles that you can find on the website that we've written. This one deals with the topic of genetic entropy. The reality that most mutations are deleterious. The majority of mutations are nearly neutral. They build up slowly over time. Natural selection is very limited. Natural selection is basically a fine-tuning mechanism that keeps a species as strong as it can be. It's not a creative force. It doesn't add anything novel, and it can't see the majority of mutations. They are invisible. And so they spread, they build up, and they lead to genetic degeneration and genetic sickness. They're not moving things forward. They're actually resulting in devolution rather than evolution. And so that's an article you can see there that we've written and also peer-reviewed by Dr. John Sanford, the author of Genetic Entropy. Here's a couple of articles. One of them based on a research project that we engaged in. I did this research project with a friend, Chris Roop, and we found evidence strongly contradicting the human chromosome 2 fusion explanation. So again, the best evidence for evolution has been completely overturned. Now, here's a section on our website. Like Kent, we have a lot of fun refuting the critics. Let's see what they have to say. And we have experience with a lot of the same skeptics. And show us your best evidence for why you believe you're related to a banana plant. And we'll interact with it. And so here on our website, sanfordtruthministries.com, you can go to the Refuting Critics section, and you'll find a list of many critics that we're all too familiar with: Simon Dan, Dr. Dan Stern, Cardinal, BioLogos. We've got Professor Dave here, who Kent had an excellent debate with. Aaron Ra, of course, so you can find videos and articles addressing their major arguments. Matt and I just recently engaged in a 4.5-hour debate seminar with Conspiracy Cats, a prominent YouTube evolutionist, on Adam, Eve, and biblical creationists. So if you want to see how an evolutionist might respond or interact with these arguments, feel free to check out this debate. We're very happy with it. And I think it showcases why, again, it's a great time to be a biblical creationist. I do like to start these presentations with some important Bible passages and mottos. And so 1 Corinthians 2:5, an important passage, that your faith should not stand in the wisdom of men, but in the power of God. The wisdom of men, especially unsaved men, might say that everything came from nothing, that non-living chemicals somehow evolved into the first self-replicating molecule, and single-celled like ancestors evolved into multi-celled ancestors, into fish, amphibians, reptiles, man, eventually man. And so that's what the world might say. But that would contradict God's word. And we're here today to show you that science confirms God's word. Good science always upholds God's word. Now, the evolution and creation models, they have a lot of overlap. This here is going to be a main focus of our presentation, the evidence that matters. And so I want to focus on what's called differentiating lines of evidence. So you have agnostic pieces of evidence, which I'll cover briefly, so we're all on the same page. And then we have pieces of evidence that can discriminate between the models, where only one model, as we're going to see here, the creation model, can explain or account for. We need to define terms, ladies and gentlemen. The evolutionists, they like the fallacy bait and switch. They'll say, what, you don't believe in evolution? Well, it depends on what you mean by evolution. If by evolution you mean change over time, or even the technical definition, changes in allele frequencies, an allele being a genetic variant, in populations over generations, well, then we're not going to have an issue. Things change over time. Our thinking processes change over time. Our phones, technology changes over time. Automobiles change over time. So we get it. Things in the biological world adapt. They change. So if you mean by evolution that wolves, dingoes, coyotes, and domestic dogs are related through common ancestry, then we're really not going to have a problem. But what evolutionists actually mean by evolution is the theory of common descent. The idea that not only dogs and wolves are related, but that dogs, wolves, banana plants, and whales are related. Here's a phylogenetic tree of life that they like to present as science, even though it's evolutionary philosophy. Notice what they say. We are related to every living thing. That means you are related to a bacteria. You're related to a fish. You can see these lines all going back to a single common ancestor. Again, how to grow an evolutionary tree, fish, chimpanzees, bacteria, all related through common ancestry. So that's what evolutionists mean by evolution. And that is where we have the issue. That would not be science. That would be science fiction. And so what we hold to, because this is what the Bible teaches, this is what science has confirmed, separate ancestry. That no, not all life is related through common ancestry. The Bible says that God creates two people, Adam and Eve, just roughly 6,000 years ago. And he creates them separate from any other form of life. That includes chimpanzees, orangutans, and strawberries. And has science confirmed this? Absolutely. We'll see some of that evidence here today. Fish to fisherman evolution, it's a fairy tale. They'll say, well, time, give it enough time, and we can evolve bacteria-like organisms into biologists, or goo to you. But the problem is, as I covered briefly earlier, there's so-called mechanisms of evolution like mutations, which are overwhelmingly deleterious. Natural selection is limited in the amount that it can do. And these mutations are not going to provide the raw genetic material to drive evolution. But they'll say, give us enough time and large-scale evolution can take place. But if I were to tell you that Superman, if he were to fly quickly through the air, evolutionary logic would say, well, that's not science, that's fiction. But if I were to say, well, Superman, if he were to fly slowly through the air, well, that's reality. No, they're both fiction. And so whether evolution happening quickly or slowly, it's both a fairy tale. Here we have an image where I want to explain what I mean by agnostic evidence and differentiating evidence. So hypothetically, if we were to have, let's say, two Earth, let's say the multiverse were true, where you had Earth 1 and Earth 2. In Earth 1, creation's true. In Earth 2, evolution's true. Well, because we have a lot of overlap in the worlds of creation and evolution, there are many pieces of evidence that both models, as a matter of fact, many different models could account for. And so, for example, if I were to say, well, the sky is blue, therefore creation is true, the evolutionists could say, well, we can also account for why the sky is blue. This might upset the flat earthers, but if I were to say, because the earth is round, creation's true, well, again, the evolutionists might be able to account for that same data. And so let's say on Earth 2, where evolution is true, hypothetically, okay, they might look to a piece of evidence like homology, but that piece of evidence would be overall agnostic to the debate because creationists can also account for these shared structures in the biological world. Evolutionists might explain it as descent with modification, that these structures were inherited from past common ancestors, whereas creationists would look to common design. And so again, there's a lot of overlap in the creation versus evolution worldviews and models. And therefore, it's important that we focus on pieces of evidence that are not agnostic to the debate, but pieces of evidence that only one model can explain. And that's where the biblical creation model prevails. And so here are several agnostic pieces of evidence, for the most part, that evolutionists love to focus on. They've been focusing on these for years and years. Homology, classification, nested hierarchies, so-called transitional forms. Here you could see homologous structures, these shared anatomical structures in the biological world. They look to DNA as well as being, you can find homology in DNA. These interesting mosaics like Archaeopteryx and Tiktaalik. Well, let's start with homology. Firstly, when it comes to homology in DNA, our bodies have to perform a lot of the same functions as, let's say, chimpanzees, our supposed closest cousin. They say that we share a common ancestor with chimpanzees. We go back roughly 6 million years ago. Well, we have to perform a lot of the same functions as chimpanzees, and therefore we would need a lot of the same DNA to code for the proteins that help to make up our bodies to function. And in terms of anatomy and morphology, well, human engineers design in homologous patterns. Why shouldn't God? What about classification? Well, what evolutionists like to do is draw a circle big enough where they can put anything into it. And so if you were to put, okay, here's a circle, here's a category, things affected by gravity. Well, at this point, you'd have all life, you'd have bowling balls, and you could have planets. Apparently, all those things are related because that's the classification. See, man has a lot of time in their hands. They like to classify things: kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. I don't think the chimpanzee, I don't think the dog cares how we classify them. It's interesting to look at certain traits and certain features and classify organisms based on those traits, but it doesn't demonstrate relationship. We do the same thing in man-made designs. Again, here's modes of transportation. So you could have motorcycles, trucks, boats, airplanes. Doesn't prove any kind of relationship. Things that breathe. Okay, so you got human beings, platypus, gorillas, all related through common ancestry. Classification does not demonstrate relationship. I like to categorize my books. I'm sure Kent does as well. I'll categorize my books in different categories, like theology books, creation books, maybe books about history. That's just something we like to do. And again, it doesn't demonstrate any kind of relationship. Hard to classify vehicles. Okay, so the evolutionists, they like to look to interesting mosaics in the biological world. And they argue that these mosaics are what's called transitional forms. The biblical creation model would say this. The Bible says that we, as man, are created in God's image. Therefore, there should be something about us that reflects the divine. Perhaps we can get an idea into how God designed the biological world based on the way we design things. And it just so turns out that we design in homologous patterns. We even design in nested hierarchical patterns, whereas sedan shares a lot more, or has a lot more in common with an SUV or a van than it does with a boat or an airplane. In the same way that in the biological world, a human and a chimpanzee share a lot more in common in anatomy, morphology, physiology, and genetics than a human and a banana. And so these are hierarchies by design and not descent. But in the world of modes of transportation, human engineers actually design hard to classify vehicles. For example, we have what could be called the perfect quote unquote transitional form with your crossover SUV. You don't necessarily want a van and an SUV doesn't fully meet your needs. How about a crossover SUV, which blends features of both vans and SUVs? Some cars that are not built anymore, but are kind of fun. You've got the 1961 Amphicar, blends the features of modes of transportation that would drive on the road and also boats. The Bond Bug, Chevrolet SSR, the military. They've realized that blending features of different kinds of vehicles actually benefit. This is good design. And so the military has invented what's called the military amphibious assault vehicle. This is built for the transitional environment between sea and land. And so a tank might not work too well in the sea, but it does work good on land. Your boat, your military ship is not going to work too well on the land, but it works good in the sea. What's nice about the military amphibious assault vehicle is it works beautifully between that environment where you have sea to land. And so humans have designed interesting mosaics. Human engineers design in homologous patterns and also nested hierarchical patterns. And so this is reflective of God's design and not common descent, not evolution. Now, God, he's the amazing engineer. Let's get into some evidence that can discriminate between the models. Observations that only the creation model can account for. Now, incredibly, in the genome, you have 6 feet of DNA in every single one of your cells. God is an amazing packaging engineer. If life were simple, evolution might have a chance. But life is not simple. Life is incredibly complex. It turns out that letters in the genome are incorporated into multiple messages. We write books that can be read forwards, but we can't write books that can be read both forwards and backwards. DNA can do this. DNA has a message forwards, backwards, and every other DNA letter, A, T, C, G, you have a third encoded message. We can't write books that have these multiple overlapping codes. Now, when it comes to these messages in DNA, these are essentially the instructions for building and operating a living organism. A single sequence of DNA can be read in different ways to produce different proteins. And we're supposed to believe that all this evolved by chance for no reason at all. What I like to focus on is what's called mutually interdependent systems. There's many different examples of this, but one that I want to briefly touch on is called DNA and DNA repair enzymes. Now, this is a major chicken and egg problem for the naturalist, for the evolutionist. So it has been said that in a single day, in a single cell, and we have 60 to 65 trillion cells, that you can experience up to 1 million DNA breaks. Well, thankfully, we have these amazingly designed DNA repair enzymes. They go in and they fix the majority of these DNA breaks. It just so turns out that these DNA repair enzymes, though, they're encoded by the DNA. So the question for the evolutionist is, what came first, DNA or the DNA repair enzymes? You need the DNA to encode the information for the DNA repair enzymes, but you need the DNA repair enzymes for DNA to exist, or else living organisms would go extinct after just a couple generations with all of these DNA legions accumulating again in a single day. And so you need both systems working simultaneously at the same time. The book of Genesis says that God created everything and it was very good. And this is what needs to be true. Slow evolutionary processes can account for these systems. This is why the biblical model of human origins makes the most sense of this data. And so here's a couple more differentiating lines of evidence that evolutionists can't really account for, and then we'll hand it to Matt to cover a few more. So here are the Y chromosomes of humans and the great apes. This is fascinating because this comes directly from the conventional literature. Now, over here to the far left, you've got the human Y chromosome, and then you've got the great apes. So chimpanzees, bonobos, gorillas, so on and so forth. The Y chromosome is called uniparentally inherited DNA. It's only passed down from one side. It's actually passed down paternally. So I got my Y chromosome from my father. My two sons got their Y chromosome from me. And for the most part, it's non-recombining. Recombination is essentially this process of genetic shuffling every single generation. This is how you get novel chromosomal combinations, because you get genetic shuffling every single generation due to recombination. But the Y chromosome lacks a counterpart. Now, they do say that there might be a little bit of recombination at the tips, but for the most part, non-recombining DNA. Therefore, you'd expect it to be a little more stable, and therefore, if evolution is true, the Y chromosome should be more similar to the chimpanzee Y chromosome. Well, it turns out, amazingly, and again, this is right from the secular literature, that when you consider overall gene content, size differences, and architecture, the human Y chromosome and the chimpanzee Y chromosome are less than 30% the same. If evolution is true, you're going to have to account for those massive differences in the time period since the split. I like to say it's the differences that make all the difference. We can account for similarities, creationists. We can also account for dissimilarities because we'd expect both. Evolutionists might be able to account for some differences, but it's massive differences like this, especially in genetics, that they really struggle with. They did not predict this. Again, you can look at the chimpanzee Y chromosome and the human Y. It's half the size. So apparently half of it was lost. This is all color-coded. So this kind of DNA is called heterochromatin in gray. That's a tightly packed kind of DNA, densely packed, comprises a lot of repetitive sequences called satellite DNA. It looks like the chimpanzee, if evolution is true, would have lost the entirety of its heterochromatic arm. Evolutionists like to look to nested hierarchies. Okay, notice the human Y and the gorilla Y. They're more similar to each other than either is to the chimpanzee. Well, there's a break in their so-called hierarchy. They admit this directly in their papers on the topic. They say their Y chromosomes differ just a little bit. No, enormously in size and gene content. For example, the chimpanzee Y is only half the size of the human Y. That's what I pointed out there. And the percentage of gene families shared by these two chromosomes that split roughly 6 million years ago, that's their evolutionary bias and assumptions built into this paper, is similar to that shared by, notice this, human and chicken autosomes that split 310 million years ago. That's the kind of differences that we see. And do they say that they expected this? No, they say puzzlingly. The human Y is more similar to the gorilla Y than to the chimpanzee Y. This makes sense if creation is true. From our starting point, it makes sense that we'd have these massive differences because humans and chimpanzees simply aren't related. That question doesn't even cross their mind. They should be asking themselves, looking at this data, maybe humans and chimpanzees aren't even related. Maybe common descent isn't true. Now, here is from 2024. So as time goes on, as technology gets better and better, and we get more sophisticated analyses of these Y chromosomes, the sex chromosomes, it gets worse for the evolutionists. So we have even better data now, and you can look down here at the human Y compared to the chimpanzee Y. Only 26.2%. That right there would be a piece of differentiating evidence that creationists can better account for. Evolutionists have failed over and over again to account for those differences. Now, when you remove time from the evolutionists, no amount of time is going to help take fish to fishermen or good to you, but they do require time. When you take time away from them, evolution simply can't happen. They require a lot of time. Now, here's several pieces of evidence that limit the age of the Earth. And for sake of time, we're only going to be able to cover a couple. But you've got helium diffusion, magnetic field, comets. Comets is an interesting one. We know that comets cannot last very long. A comet is made of ice and dirt, and they orbit the sun in an elliptical path. Now, as comets get close to Earth, that icy material actually gets blasted out into space. That means comets are getting smaller and smaller over time as they lose mass. And because of this, we can actually calculate the rate as to which these comets are being depleted. And the data strongly suggests that they cannot last millions of years. Again, another piece of evidence more consistent with a young Earth and what the Bible says about origins. Magnetic field. We also know the rate as to which the magnetic field decays. And it turns out that the magnetic field is decaying rapidly, much like the genome, all subject to the second law of thermodynamics, the law of increasing entropy. Genomes are degenerating. We know that the magnetic field is also decaying. And we can measure the decay of Earth's magnetic field. And it turns out that if you were to run Earth's magnetic field back even 60,000 years, it would have been stronger than a neutron star, which is more than enough to rip the atoms of your body apart. Now, another incredible piece of evidence that limits the age of the Earth is helium and zircon crystals. I've got an entire talk on this. I'm going to run through it really quickly just so we can hand it to Matt to cover several more pieces of evidence that I think will blow your mind. And so helium leakage from radioactive minerals demolishes the billions of years paradigm. It has been claimed that zircon crystals are the oldest materials ever discovered on Earth. They've said that it provides the kind of evidence, direct evidence of conditions on the planet over 4.4 billion years ago. And what you're about to see is amazing testimony to a young Earth. Now, as uranium decays into lead, what you produce as a byproduct is helium. Helium is a slippery atom. It's a gas, and the leakage rate of helium is very fast. And so it leaks out and it escapes into the atmosphere. Now, here's the thing. If these zircon crystals really were billions of years old and uranium is decaying into lead, we find uranium, lead, and helium. So we know there has been decay. But if the billions of years paradigm is true, then we should only find a little bit of helium, because that helium, again, would be escaping into the atmosphere. Well, it turns out when these zircon crystals have been studied, it turns out that we have an abundance of helium. There's a lot of helium, which means helium has not been leaking out for hundreds of millions of years. For all that helium to still be retained in these zircon crystals, the zircon crystals must be young. And several PhD scientists, Dr. Russell Humphreys, for example, they looked at helium diffusion rates. And what they discovered, you can read a paper on this, they actually discovered that the helium loss, these newly measured rates of helium loss from these zircons, puts the age of the Earth, limits it to between 6 and 10,000 years. I mean, right there is exactly what we would expect if the Bible is true. And carbon-14 and diamonds, we'll save that one for another day, because we're going to hand it over to Matt now. And Matt, whenever you're ready, brother, take it away.
Oh my, that was quick. That was quick. I was still getting ready. It's okay. Here we go. All right. I found this image right here directly from Kent. And this is one of the main reasons that we're doing this. We're equipping the audience so that they can help their children. So when they go off to school, they don't fall victim to what they're going to learn about evolution. Instead, they're going to know everything about evolution and the young Earth creation answer to those things. So today we're going to go through some of what I believe are going to be some of the typical questions that you're going to get as a Christian creationist, and what your kids might be told are not true. So we're going to hit both of those. One of these things is going to be, how did Noah feed all the animals? And how did he clean up all of their waste? Now, I have a video. If it doesn't play the audio, that's completely fine. I'll explain it. But these are the two questions that come up a lot. And one of the first things that we got to talk about is how many animals are actually on the ark. People think that today's amount of species has been the amount of species going backwards in time. So therefore, there's millions of species on the ark. It makes absolutely no sense. But for those that are new to the topic, they might actually think that this is a really good argument. So there's multiple ways to answer this, and this is an amazing one right here. Sorry. Let me know if you can hear it. If not, let me know. Okay, no audio. No problem. Let me turn this down. Okay. So what you're seeing now is a discovery that happened when they started investigating different animals and looking inside of their genetics. They noticed that all mammals have the ability to hibernate, but in the form of something called torpor. And what this is it's not a hibernation where they go in and they just sleep perpetually through an entire winter. What they do is when food is restricted, they can fall into a natural sleep pattern and lower their heart rate and body temperature to the point where they don't require food. They even stop going to the bathroom. So what happens is they realize, like a bear doesn't just look around and say, oh, well, it's winter, I better fall asleep now or else I'm going to die. No, actually, the body tells it, okay, you don't have many resources right now. You have to fall asleep. You have to be able to preserve the calories that you have in your body. So that's what they do. They walk into a cave and they fall asleep. This is a normal version of that all mammals have inside of them. So they can fall asleep on their own based on caloric content. And reptiles have this as well. It's called turbation. So Noah might have not had to do that much for most of the animals on the ark. That's not saying there wasn't tons of room and food storage for these animals. There could have been. So that brings us to the next question. How would he have maintained the waste? Well, he made the ark and it was made out of wood. He would have had wood chips. Well, that's an interesting thing because when you go into the north, where the region is very cold up in Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, animals come down and they start living underneath the homes. And they do that because it's warmer under there. But what the problem with that is, it smells horrendous because they leave waste behind. And the people discovered, hey, wait a minute, if I just put some wood shavings down in there, the animals go to the bathroom in it and it absorbs the smell. It makes it warmer and you don't have to clean up anything for over a year. Well, how long was Noah's Ark? It would last about a year, right? With the animals inside. So literally he had no waste to clean up, nothing to do. And all he had to do was throw wood shavings on the ground and walk away. And they do this today. And animals do completely fine. They don't have to clean out the cages. So it's an amazing thing. And here's something even more strange. When in these cold regions, the animals seem to get along with each other. They go under the houses and the wolves lay next to the animals that they would normally hunt and kill. And they're completely fine with it. It's almost like they go, okay, truce. I don't want to freeze and neither do you. Let's just go live here together. Pretty amazing if you ask me. So this is what I meant earlier. Reptiles as well fall into this sleep called brumation. And they also don't require calories and they can sleep through most of the entire journey. So one thing that I find interesting is that critics, they mock the idea, but I don't know why, because they think that a desert-dwelling sheepherder who lived 5,000 years ago dreamed up the perfect dimensions of a seaworthy ship that could actually hold animals. And these studies have been done. This was actually on a Nova live TV presentation one time where they actually tested Noah's Ark to see what would happen if they threw gigantic waves at it. And the dimensions of the ark were absolutely perfect. And of course, it never aired again because they were probably expecting it to fail. But just goes to show you that, wait a minute, why is there a guy that lives in the middle of a desert dreaming up gigantic boats and getting the dimensions perfectly correct? Not to mention flood traditions that are all around the world talking about Noah's flood, and also the Tower of Babel legends that go around the world as well. These things are just icing on the cake for us. And just wrong picture. Okay. Another topic I would like you guys to think about is we're going to look at what is known as the fossil record. Now, the fossil record's literally something that would be made up, but what we're going to do is we're going to look at it from the perspective of a flood. We're going to look at this from the above, and you are going to see what makes way more sense from the perspective of catastrophism or deep time. We're going to be looking at the United States, and we're going to notice that some of the first layers that you'll actually notice, and we're going to use the evolutionary layers and their names, just so you guys can see for yourselves and not be confused by anything. So I'm going to be showing you the first areas that get flooded with water and their names, and you'll notice something interesting. These are the areas where we find trilobites. These were the first areas that were flooded, and trilobites lived on coastal regions, and they were the first areas that were flooded. Now, if a flood started in the ocean and started to go up on the continent, what would you expect to find? Well, you would probably expect to find the trilobites were trying to also survive and moving up in the soft mud that eventually solidified into solid rock and left their trails behind. And that's exactly what we see. We see trilobites moving through millions of years of evolution and then dying in the upper layers as they were running from that. And then so I made more maps. And these are nice because of their color. You're going to really notice them stand out. We're going to look at the Jurassic habitat. You'll notice that it starts to form. These are all of the fossils that we find during that time. Then we're going to look at the early Cretaceous habitat. Now you'll notice that the fossils have started to spread out, and you'll notice a few here on the coast, and you'll notice some of them over here, and right down the middle, a vast majority of them. Then we're going to look at the Middle Cretaceous. You're going to start to notice that the formation of the fossils start to congregate together right here in the middle. We find ferocious dinosaurs, no humans anywhere, no trilobites either, mostly dinosaurs. And then, but why is that? Well, actually, because when you look at the world, you could say, well, if it was ever connected at one point in time, the humans would have not lived in those areas. But what do we notice? We notice that the continent started to flood, and it looked like this as it was flooding up. And that's exactly when you look at the fossils, where those fossils are located. And the last part, meaning they were running away from these floodwaters, and they were going up higher land. And then you can see this higher land was the last refuge of those dinosaurs. And then when you overlay the actual land with the continent and the fossils, they match perfectly. These are the last stand of the dinosaurs and all life before they eventually died. And the last part of the Cretaceous ecosystem, you can see that the flood now is starting to push those fossils down into the gully because now it's flooded, and it's starting to push them towards the edge of the continents as it's going underwater. And the final stage of the flood is you can see the fossils have now shifted to the lower ground right on the edge of the continent and being pushed down here in the Morrison Formation and out towards California on the ridge. And then what do we find? 1,500 feet of sand right off the edge from here from Florida over to Texas. Now, if that's not evidence of a flood, I don't know what is. I mean, it's so obvious when you look at it. It's amazing. So Darwin, he predicted slow Darwinian gradualism when we look at the fossil record. What does the fossil record actually show? Everything else but that. We find disharmonious associations. That's where we find cold-blooded, cold-temperature species with warm tropical species mixed together. We find ghost lineages. We find convergent evolution, stasis, Lazarus taxons, punctuated equilibrium. Everything. We only needed to find one of those really to disprove a theory, but that one really did it. This comment says it well. Instead of finding the slow, smooth, progressive change Lyell and Darwin had expected, they saw in the fossil record rapid bursts of change, new species seemingly out of nowhere, and then unchanged for millions of years. Darwin said that there's no way we could find soft-tissued species in it to be preserved in the fossil record. But if there was a flood, there would. And that's exactly what we find. And people say, there's local floods happen all the time. Don't you understand that? Of course we understand that. These are deep sea creatures that you can find that are dying. These aren't river creatures. These aren't freshwater trout. These are ocean, deep sea creatures that are being preserved. You can find some that are gigantic, giving birth at the time. Now here's the dead giveaway. This is a picture where we find fossil tracks before we find the bodies that left the tracks in the rock layers. So meaning the tracks are always found first. We find bird feathers before we find the birds or the dinosaurs themselves. Here's a picture of a dinosaur stepping through millions of years when the rocks were actually soft. Why? It's obvious. It was during a flood. How many dinosaurs supposedly of Tyrannosaurus Rex lived at this time? They believe about 2.5 billion Tyrannosaurus Rex lived on Earth. But the problem, where are they? They haven't found very many dinosaur fossils at all for Tyrannosaurus Rex. This is how many they found out of those 2.5 billion. All those dots, that's what we've actually found. Not many T-Rexes at all, supposedly, for those billions of years and billions of dinosaurs, because they didn't exist. And what we find are mostly disarticulated. But when we do find them, guess what? They died from suffocation. They've died trying to breathe. They've gasping for air, dying. That's why? Because the flood is what killed them. And guess what? Usually, most of the original bone is still preserved inside a dinosaur fossil. But how? Because it didn't happen that long ago. Now, we have evidence for dinosaur with man. Not many, but this is one of them. Francis H. Holmes wrote a book called The Ashley Phosphate Rocks. And Kent actually probably has an older version of it. Actually, he probably has this book right here, Dinosaurs and Man Together, from Mount Blanco. And he used to have it at Dinosaur Adventureland. He might still have it. And this is a great book because it actually shows you all of the things that they found in this single layer made of phosphate. And it's a mix between, it's a dinosaur graveyard, but it's also got aquatic life, ancient life, and dinosaurs with modern life. See, we find down here things that are alive in the Cretaceous mixed in with the Pleistocene, which is the woolly mammoth and the saber-toothed cat and human beings, all in the same geologic time. And we have depictions of dinosaurs drawn by man from different places around the world. All depicting clearly dinosaurs. We have one here that I really like. This was on the cover of a book, and the critic actually wrote back and said, it's not a dinosaur. That's impossible because we know dinosaurs went extinct 12 million years ago. How that date has changed, huh? I like this one as well. Here's a great one. This upper left-hand picture right here shows a brontosaurus. This is in Mexico, I think, or no, New Mexico, Arizona. And the critics say, no, you're actually looking at a stain. Those are just the stains that make it look like legs. And the head doesn't have that eye. It's got a little squiggly line right here. And the person looked at it from very far away, by the way. He didn't actually I didn't get up close and actually test it. That was just the study that he did. That's so easily refuted because when you look at this image, you can't really notice much until I outline it. Uh-oh, there's a second dinosaur there. I guess the stains are magical stains that produce dinosaurs when no one's looking. Anyway, another really fun thing for you guys to know that I want you to take away from today is that we actually have boundaries. And these boundaries that are found in genetics, people want to know, like, well, so evolution can probably happen, speciation can happen, but what is the limit of that? What are the boundaries of that? And this really cool sweeping gene survey that happened in 2018, they actually found that all species have a telltale sign of emerging at about the same time inside of them. And here's what the study shows. They looked at DNA barcoding, a particular region inside the mitochondria called cytochrome C, and they found that the differences between everything are very shallow, and everything has about the same amount of diversity. So that means a global reset had to happen at the exact same time. And this is what the DNA barcoding looks like. It's kind of pretty. And it really confuses the scientists. One of them said, although it's easy to imagine humans passing through a bottleneck 170,000 years ago, it's hard to believe that the exact same thing happened in all species. Did herring really pass through an equally recent population bottleneck, and anchovies too? I mean, it makes a good point. Why are fish dying and with land life at the exact same time? Does that sound familiar, everyone? Perhaps a global flood, anyone? So they went looking, the scientists, and they found nothing out of the ordinary happened 200 to 100,000 years ago in the fossil record that they believe in. They went back 200,000 years and looked in the fossil record, and they're like, look, there's no trace of any global catastrophic event 200,000 years ago. What's going on? Well, creationists realized that, and they took that study and they posted it everywhere. Answers in Genesis, CMI, all the main organizations were posting about this. It's an amazing study. Guess what? We have genetic boundaries. We have all life being forming at the same time, popping out of a genetic bottleneck where 90% of life died and only 10% survived. So that study had to do damage control, and they put a warning, a disclaimer on the top of the study. And they said, no. This study definitely supports Darwinian evolution. There's no way that it supports that creationist stuff. It's funny, too, because before they did that, they wrote how much it actually debunked what we know about the evolution of species. And they actually, the scientists admitted in an interview, which you can find, they go, another unexpected find from the study was a species have clear genetic boundaries, something and not much in between. This perplexed Darwin in his day. And the scientist said, this conclusion is very surprising, and I fought against it as hard as I could. So what did they find? They found these genetic boundaries, meaning that when you take a species and you look at its nucleotide sequence and you look at where mutations are and you remove those mutations, they go back to a consensus sequence not too long ago, back to an original ancestor of that particular kind. Exactly what creationists predicted. Independent lines of ancestry that converge. And other studies have confirmed it as well. Guess what? Wolves, all dogs go right back to a single wolf. Exactly what the Bible talked about. Like, wait a minute, that's not possible, they say. You can't just have that. You can't just take a single species and have it repopulate the world. Let's investigate that then, shall we? Because this is what is known as the founder effect. But first, let me show you this little image that the critics like to throw up there. You humans can't survive from just a pair of 8. You can't just have 2 animals go out and inbreed and repopulate the whole earth. Or can we? Because studies have shown exactly that we can do that. Here's wild sheep that descended from a single pair. They were left on the islands, and they were dropped off. And within just a few hundred years, actually, the population, under 100 years, I believe, is actually the population was up to 700. Had no problem at all. We have evidence for stick insects called tree lobsters. A couple pairs. Population took off. We have Darwin's finches himself. Population did completely fine from just a single pair of individuals. 24 rats were dropped off. And now, guess what? There's 200 million of them. No problem. 5 deer were dropped off on Finland. Now you can kill as many as you want. There's over 100,000 of them in just 80 years. They made a movie where on Catalina Island where they dropped off 14 bison. Their population's 150. You can do whatever you want. If you want one for a pet, you can go take one. Here's 7 lionfish that they studied. And guess what? Their population completely took over. And they're invasive now. They're actually a problem. Have you ever heard of the Italian wall lizard? Evolutionists like to use it because of the cecal valve they believe evolved out of nowhere from them. Guess what? They were also dropped off in just a handful. They repopulated the earth, no problem, as well, from their standpoint. From just 5 adults. That's not supposed to happen in the evolutionary idea and the concepts. How about this? Wolves. We have evidence for the exact same thing. How about humans? We got that as well. And guess what they say about these things? It's unexpected. They never predicted this. Yeah, no kidding, they didn't predict it. It's completely contrary to evolution. But the Bible predicted it. It mentioned that animals would be on the ark in unclean in pairs of 2 and clean in pairs of 7. So now we have evidence to back that up. I mean, it's really just so easy to point to pretty much anything. Are there any questions that have come in? I could keep going, but let's bring some people in here. Throw the mic around if you want. If not, I'll keep going. Don't make me.
Do you want me to cover the C14 real quick? Let's see this. You guys can rail against evolution all you like. See, that's where the critics go wrong. It's easy to refute evolution. That's what we've done. That's what Ken has done. But what we also do is provide a superior model. Are you hearing me, Matt? Matt, can you hear me, brother?
I'm sorry, I lost audio, guys. I'll mess with it. You keep going. I can't hear anything. Keep going, though.
Yeah, my audio might not be. Or you can hear me now, Matt? Kent, can you hear me, brother?
I hear something.
Okay, so Matt, I think you might have just been on. Well, if you can
It's
hear
in the
me, that's
distance,
okay.
but I'm good.
I'll
going.
keep responding. If you can hear me, then that's good. So yes, we not only demolish evolution, it's easy to do. We provide a superior model, a more elegant explanation in terms of the origin of life, the origin of biodiversity. And so, yes, we debunk evolution, but we show why biblical creation can better explain the evidence. So can't notice that he said there's no evidence for God. He must not have been listening the whole time, brother.
Yeah, can you put that comment back up? There's one more thing I think you guys missed. Even if you disprove evolution, we did. Okay. We don't need to prove creation. We're not asking for that to be taught in the schools at taxpayer expense.
Right.
Doug, you're going to go on in your dream world and think evolution is true, even though it's been disproven, because there's no better theory. Therefore, we have to get all the people to pay for your religion to be taught. That's what you're going to go on and say, Doug. I promise you, aren't you? Yeah. You don't have to prove creation. I think it's the obvious alternative. There's only two choices. Somebody made the world or it made itself. If you think of a third choice, let me know, okay? But no, that's the only choice. And evolution is impossible. So by default, had to be created.
Right.
Which creator? Which one? Is it Allah, Buddha, Jehovah? That's a different argument. But there has to be a creator, period. Okay?
Well, remember, Kent, Superman flying quickly through the air, that's fiction. But if Superman were to fly, he puts his underwear over his pants, right? So if he were to fly slowly through the air, that's science. That's reality, isn't it, Kent?
Yeah, in their mind, in their mind it is.
Any other questions, Joseph?
No. I have one more question. When are you guys going to come visit Dinosaur Adventureland?
That needs to happen in 2026, 100%. Me and Matt we'll sit right by you, brother, and we'll demolish evolution together. What do you say, Matt?
Is your Canadian government, the communist leaders up there, do they allow you to leave now?
I'll figure out a way.
Okay.
I'll swim across the river if I have to. One Canadian and two Americans demolishing evolution together. Sounds fun.
Amen. Hey, all of you watching, please contact everybody you know that teaches evolution, professors at any school, junior high, high school, college, advanced education, and say we're willing to debate. We'd like to debate any of them, all of them. They won't do it, Donnie. I only made it to 389. I was hoping to get to 1,000. We got to hurry. Come on, guys, bring it on.
Well, we need to put out the challenge right now. Anybody who believes that they're related to a banana plant, anybody who believes that they have good evidence for evolution, common descent, reach out to either myself or Joseph, and let's set up some debates. Kent, we got to get you to debate 5. I miss hosting all those debates with you. Yeah, I was saying before we went live, I've moderated about 120 of your debates, brother.
Awesome. I'm ready for more anytime. That it? We lost him. No. Okay.
Matt. Oh, Joseph, since Matt's having a little trouble hearing, can you, just to end things with a bang, can you share my screen really quickly? And I wanted to show the audience something. If we have a couple minutes, Joseph. Yeah. Oh, perfect. I want to let the audience know that we covered a lot of material and we could only cover each point for a couple minutes each. We do have presentations focused on each specific point. For example, we've given several on Adam and Eve, where we just focus an entire hour on just the scientific evidence for Adam and Eve, or just the scientific evidence for young Earth from helium and zircon crystals, for example. We have another talk that I give on carbon-14 in diamonds. And so real quickly, I wanted to go through a couple of these slides because I think this data is fascinating. So as you can see on the slide, if every atom in the whole Earth, or in the whole universe, I'll add, were radiocarbon, they would decay so quickly that no carbon-14 would be left on Earth after only 1 million years. And that's probably giving the evolutionists a little too much credit. Really, we shouldn't find any C14 because it has such a short half-life. It decays away so quickly in anything 500,000 years. Yet we find C14 all throughout the so-called geologic column, we find C14 in diamonds. For example, diamonds are the hardest substance on Earth. They're created deep within the earth. They're resistant to contamination. C14 is created through cosmic ray bombardment in the atmosphere. So something like a diamond, which is claimed to be 1 billion plus years old, that's shielded from cosmic rays. So we can make a prediction. Okay, if the earth really is billions of years old, then when we look for radiocarbon in things like coal, diamonds, dinosaur fossils, we shouldn't find any C14. And what do we find? We find C14. Notice this right from their own literature. So these are examples, Kent, from the secular radiocarbon literature. And you find, you know, the supposed year, marble, shell, certain bones, wood, all detectable levels of C14. They analyzed